All right, now we're getting into the part that applies if you have employees, right? So everything I covered prior to this, you didn't have to have employees for it to matter. All the other tax breaks I'm going to discuss only apply if you have employees. So if you don't have employees, you can do one of two things. Keep listening, learn, talk to your friends who have employees, or say, well, this politically incorrect, offensive, evil, knuckle-dragging, flyover country yokel who doesn't like paying taxes need not be listened to any further. I have suffered enough. Whatever floats your boat. So, new law, as of April 1, if you have employees, you're paying people on a W-2, not contractors, employees, you must pay them sick leave, and you must pay them family leave. And this is a deduction that a lot of people are overlooking. There's an opportunity here. John, how can there be an opportunity? The stupid government is requiring me to pay my employees sick and family leave. That costs me money. I don't appreciate it. Well, the government's reimbursing you 100% for paying those employees sick and family leave. So if you have an employee who qualifies for sick leave, truly qualifies, I'm not saying be dishonest or lie, they truly qualify, such that you would be required to pay them under the law. Wouldn't you rather pay them the sick leave and have the government reimburse you for that pay instead of paying them regular, right? Doesn't matter if you're the employee. Let's say you have a management company, which a lot of people who own rentals either do or should have a corporate management company, a C Corp or an S Corp. If you have an S Corp, or let's say you have another business that for whatever reason has an S corporation or an LLC taxed as an S corporation, as far as the IRS is concerned, they're the same thing. And you're the sole employee and you get sick. Can you pay yourself sick leave? Yeah, actually you're required to. Can you seek reimbursement from the government for having paid yourself? Yeah. So this is potentially a tax break if done right. So let's walk through it. If you have less than 500 employees, and the employee qualifies for sick leave, and we're going to go through that definition in a minute. What is sick leave? It's not what you think. What is sick leave? If they qualify, you must pay them 80 hours in 2 weeks. You must pay them. So up to 2 weeks, they don't require you to pay more than that. And 80 hours is, of course, an 8-hour day. In fact, if you spread it out, you're going to hurt yourself. If instead of paying them 80 hours over 2 weeks, you paid them 80 hours over 4 weeks, you would only get half reimbursement. So this requires you to pay the 80 hours over the 2 weeks. If you pay that, you get reimbursed. If the employee, if they are on mandatory family leave, and by the way, that's a typo. It should say 10 weeks, not 12 weeks. So bullet point 1, 2, 3, 10 weeks, not 12 weeks. If your employee qualifies for family leave, and that employee could be you, you are required to pay them daily for up to 10 weeks, but the limit is $200 a day, $200 a day limit. So you add it up, it's up to $10,000. You get a refundable payroll tax credit. What does that mean? When you file your W-2 forms, when you pay the employee, there's always withholding, and some of that withholding is payroll taxes. You are allowed to take a portion of that payroll tax and keep it to reimburse you for having paid the employee sick leave or family leave. Well, what if that reimbursement isn't enough? What if we do the math and I paid an employee, let's just say $5,000, and I only had $3,000 of withholding? So do I get shafted on the $2,000? No, you actually tell the government, hey, here's a form, either a payroll tax form, a 941, or this new form they just came up with, a 7200. Hey, I paid the employee more than I got credit for on withholding, so I'd like the difference as a check. Please send me a check. I want full reimbursement for the sick leave or the family leave that I paid. Bottom line is it goes through your payroll provider. So if you're dealing with ADP or your accountant or QuickBooks or whomever to do your payroll, that's how you get reimbursed for paying sick and family leave, through the payroll company. They're going to know all these forms. So again, probably a little redundant here of how this works. The sick leave is up to 10 days, and there's a max on that of $511 per day. So don't pay more than $511 per day because you won't get reimbursed on it. gets included in the employee's income. You get a reimbursement from the government, which is included in your income, but you also get a deduction for having paid the employee, so it evens out. If you want to read a real nice FAQ, and this is not something I say frequently, the IRS website actually explains things in a cogent and accurate manner, which is really not normal for them. So if you look at the hypertext at the bottom of the slide, you can walk through the IRS website, and it's got a lot of good FAQs that, it's one of those things when you read the same thing said 5 different ways, which is what they do, then it sinks in better. So bottom line is you pay the sick leave, and we're going to get into when do you have to pay the sick leave. You get a government tax credit for up to 80 hours worth of sick leave as long as it's within 2 weeks. And it's that $511 per day. So if you multiply that by 10, that's your max per employee on the sick leave. The family leave is in addition. The family leave is in addition. So could you be forced to pay someone sick leave and then family leave? Yeah, but you would get reimbursed for both. So let's get into the definition of what does that mean? So the employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine isolation order related to COVID-19. For example, here in Puerto Rico, we have a very strict lockdown. You're not allowed outside unless you have a big backyard. I live in an apartment. We don't have much of an outside. I've been hassled for walking the dog. Here in Puerto Rico, we're allowed to go out for groceries, banking, and medical. That's it. If you're out for any other reason, it's a $5,000 ticket. So we're pretty much indoors. That's a ghost town out there. If you're subject to some sort of quarantine order, if the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19. So for example, the doctor says, hey, you have a heart condition, you're more vulnerable to this disease, you really need to quarantine. The employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking medical diagnosis. So those are the 3 reasons that they're entitled to sick leave. Now, here's another key bullet point that's really not in there. They have to be unable to work. So if you are quarantined but still working, you don't qualify. You have to be unable to work. That's a key point here for the sick leave and the family leave. So here's an example. You paid the employee $5,000 sick leave. The Social Security portion of the employer withholding for all employees was $3,000. So you keep the $3,000, you don't send it into the government, but you're still short $2,000. So you file a form 7200 or a 941 and you get a refund. I put that in quotes because they're cutting you a check and it's not really a refund. They just call it that because it makes them feel better. You get $2,000. Conversely, if your Social Security withholding is $9,000 and you have the employee, you paid them $5,000, then you simply send in $4,000 to the government instead of the full $9,000. The family leave credit, it's up to 10 weeks per employee, $200 per day. So up to 10 weeks, maximum of 200 per day, totals out at $10,000. And here are the causes of mandatory family leave. The employee is caring for an individual who's subject to the quarantine orders. The employee is caring for the son or daughter if the child's school or childcare facility has been closed, or their childcare provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 precautions. Or the employee is experiencing any other substantially similar condition. Oh, this is great. Defined by Health and Human Services in consultation with Department of Labor and Treasury. So 3 bureaucracies have to agree on any additional, when do you have to give family leave? I'm sure they'll get around to letting us know in 2027 what those requirements are. Bottom line, those first 2 bullet points define when you have to give family leave. And once again, there's a planning opportunity. If somebody's not productive and they need the family leave, in other words, they're not working, they're not able to work, you might as well give them the family leave. Well, hell, under these circumstances, you're required. They're getting some pay and you're getting reimbursed for it. And could that employee on family leave be you or a family member? Sure, let's not be dumb, right? Do I think your company should hire family members so that you can get this benefit? No, guys, that's not right, right? I'm aggressive. I'm willing to push the gray good and hard. I'm not willing to be dishonest. On the other hand, if you have an S corporation, the law does say that an S corporation is required to pay the owner a reasonable salary. So even if you haven't done it in the past, you should be doing it now. And if you qualify for the sick leave or family leave, then you ought to have the government pick up that portion of your salary. So this was the most complicated thing I'm going to cover. It has some moving parts. Probably have to visit the slides again if you could qualify. And the IRS website, the link I gave you, actually does make a certain amount of sense. Now, if you're self-employed and you have no employees, you can still benefit from this. So if you have any self-employment income on your 1040, just go look at your 2019 1040. Is there self-employment income on there? Or is there going to be for 2020? You get treated as an employee. And I won't go through the whole sick leave equivalent amount computation. Bottom line is the government says, if you're making money through a Schedule C, or you're getting pass-through income from a partnership that counts as self-employment income, we're going to allow you to take a credit on your 2020 return similar to what you would have gotten had you been an employee. We're going to allow you to take a credit for sick leave or family leave on your 2020 return, typically your Schedule C. We're going to give you a credit for as if you had been an employee, even though you weren't. In other words, they're trying to make the self-employed, in this case, equal to employees. That's nice. This is a good one, the employee retention credit. The employee retention credit. Let me put it in simple terms. Now, this only applies to employees. It does not apply to self-employed. So this only applies if you've got W-2 people. This is the only one that I qualify for, right? I didn't qualify for the PPP. I didn't qualify for the EIDL. I didn't qualify for the health, the sick leave or the family leave because my employees are all able to work from home and are continuing to work. So that didn't do me any good. This one will. So you can only take this one if you didn't take the PPP. And here's the gist. If you employed someone during hard times, and I'm going to define hard times, that actually means something. If you employed somebody during hard times, we're going to give you a tax credit equal to 50% of their wages, with the tax credit maxing out at $5,000. So let me repeat that. If you employed somebody during quote unquote hard times that we're going to define, we're going to give you a tax credit equal to half of their wages, up to $5,000 per person. Now, again, could this apply to you if you have an S Corp, and let's say you and one of your kids works for the S Corp? Sure. Would I go hire a bunch of family members so you can get this benefit? No, I don't think that's honest. However, if you already had them employed by the company, or you're employed by the company, you never paid yourself a wage, well, the law says if you own an S Corp, you're required to pay yourself a wage. So you need to start doing that and hopefully get this nice little tax credit. The tax credit mechanically is given to you the same way the sick leave was. So on your employment tax through your payroll service provider, your employment tax return, you get a credit against withholding. And if that credit's not enough, then you get an actual check from the government. So it works the same way mechanically. So what counts as quote unquote hard times? The first bullet point's probably the most relevant one. If the operation of the trade or business was fully or partially suspended during a given calendar quarter, so if it was suspended at all during the calendar quarter, even for just 10 minutes, due to orders from an appropriate governmental authority limiting commerce, travel, and group meetings due to the coronavirus, that's hard times. What's a good example? I think the perfect example is a restaurant. You've got some of these restaurants that are still doing delivery and takeout, but they're no longer doing in the dining room. Their business was partially suspended. So I think you have to sit back and look at your business and think about, was it partially suspended? For example, I'm not traveling and speaking because of this. And I do have some limits. While my employees and I work virtually, I still do have some limits to my tax practice in terms of not being able to be together with them face to face to go over certain things. So that might be partial suspension. So if you had a partially suspended business during the quarter, the whole wages for the whole quarter count. That's really important. If you don't meet this one, here's another one. Employers whose gross receipts declined by greater than 50% when compared to the same quarter last year. So for me, that's not, I mean, our receipts actually went up. So, but if your receipts, your gross receipts went down by 50% or more, well, I lied. If they declined by greater than 50% when compared to the corresponding quarter in the prior year, the net wages for that whole quarter count for those employees. So this is essentially you went through rough times, you didn't fire anybody, we want to help you out and give you a credit. So for those of you that have businesses or know people with businesses or pay W-2s or should have paid a W-2 to yourself because you have an S corporation, you really want to think about this credit. Hey, $5,000, I mean, if you qualify for that, it makes this call and the obnoxious lawyer worth listening to. Hello. And there's just the math on the employee retention credit. I think this is my last slide. You can get a no-doc interest-free loan via payroll taxes. So the last perk was it. If you have employees and you're filing a 941, you're paying the payroll taxes, the government says, well, you can keep half of the payroll taxes. And again, I'm not going to go into the math of which payroll taxes. Your payroll company, your payroll company can do that for you. Bottom line is 50% of the payroll taxes you can keep for a while. It's a loan. The government says you can hold on to that to help with cash flow, but we do expect you to pay half of it back by the end of the year of 21 and half of it back by the end of the year of 22. So it's an interest-free, document-free loan. But let me make a point here. I would rather owe the mob money than owe the IRS money on payroll taxes. They have extraordinary power to come after you and get payroll taxes. You do not want to owe them payroll tax. In fact, in some cases, it's criminal, not just a civil collection issue. So if you're gonna take this approach, you really want to pay the payroll tax loan back on time. You do not want to be in the position of paying late. And so I think you have to know yourself and know if you're really going to do that. And guys, that covers the presentation. My goal here was to cover some things that I think you probably haven't heard about. Most of the oxygen in the room when it comes to the CARES Act has involved PPP and EIDL. And I wanted to do kind of like the Monty Python, and now for something completely different. And so hopefully I've given you some things that allow you to keep a larger percent of what's yours, because that is what I truly believe in. My moral quest, given my views of government, is that I want you to keep what's yours. You did build that, unlike what certain presidents said. You did build that. I want you to keep as much of it as possible. Now, those of you who disagree and are thinking, you know, that fascist Trump-loving pig, pay the tax. Don't use anything I told you. Don't hire me. For the rest of you, I'm really hoping we helped you keep, and even for all of you, okay, I'll be nice. Even for those of you who vote to increase taxes, I hope you change your mind or at least have the decency to be a hypocrite and try and keep as much of your own taxes as possible. And hopefully we've given you some tools that are useful to that end. I'm going to scroll back. If anybody ever wants to get a hold of us to do client work, we take clients all over the United States for planning, returns, fighting the IRS, etc. We're happy to have your business. It is all virtual, and when you give me money, my attitude doesn't improve any, so fair warning.